With time-based processing, I'm going to discuss how we have to set stuff up because it is quite different than dynamic processing. With dynamic processing that we covered last week, we want to change the original signal. We don't want to have the original signal and add something to it. With dynamics, we want to change it, and we don't want to hear what the original one sounded like because, hey, we just changed it on purpose. We EQ'd it on purpose to get rid of certain things. We don't want to have it still playing. Same thing with compression. We just change those levels. We don't want it to have the original signal still. We want it to be changed completely. Now, with time-based processing, there we're dealing with something different. Time-based processors are processors that we're adding to the signal. So for instance, think of reverb. If you are in a room and the person's speaking to you, you hear the original sound from that person as well as also the reflections off the walls. You're hearing reverb. Now this is, part of physics. This is how nature works, and you will always have some sort of reverb. There's always going to be something of reverb. It's just the only place that you would not have any reverb and you would sound really strange is something called an anechoic chamber. The anechoic chamber is a room designed to where there is no reflections whatsoever. Everything is absorbed. We don't live in any kind of situation where we have an anechoic chamber. So we are so used to reverb that if we record very clean, clear vocals without any, reflections, well then we want to add reflections. But just like in the real world, we would hear the original signal plus that reverb signal, those reflections off the walls. So we have to set stuff up a little different. I can't just grab a reverb and throw it right on the same audio track or channel that the original signal's on, because then otherwise I change the original signal also. I change it to the reverb sound. And you'll never have a place where you hear just the reverb and no original signal. So it just doesn't work. We're going to discuss here in the time-based processing how to be able to get that same effect. In other words, where we have the original vocal and the reverb from the room. You guys will remember from when you did the describe your acoustic environment, how going into different rooms, you had different sound. That was the reverb. We can actually change the location of, let's say, how you sound. Like, let's say the person or I'm singing. If I'm singing and I recorded this in a professional studio, it's going to be very dead because we don't want any reflections for the recording. But the purpose of that is so that later I can add with a reverb unit or a reverb plugin is what we're going to cover, and make it sound like I just sang in Carnegie Hall, even though, I'm technically in a small booth with what could be called padded walls, and I don't sound anything like I'm, in Carnegie Hall, yet later in the mix, I could actually make it sound like I'm singing in Carnegie Hall. Or I can make it sound like I'm in a bathroom. Or I could make it sound like I'm in a garage. I could make it sound literally anywhere you want. That's the cool thing about having these type of processors. With the time-based effects processors, we can give the illusion of being in different locations and places and different spots in the mix as well. I'll show you how to do all that. So let's cover this assignment. The time-based processors, that's things like, for instance, reverb, delay, chorus, flange, all those different processors that you could actually put onto a track. It doesn't have to be a vocal, it could be anything. The assignment is based same way as most of the other assignments you've had already. You're going to get to download a session. All right. We'll be changing the session name to your last name, your first name, RPR time base. Okay, in fact, I'm going to download that session because I forgot to put it over here. So just click on it. You'll see it downloads pretty decently quick if you have a good connection. There we go. Got it. Time base effects. All right. So the instructions, which are in a keynote, so that way you could actually hear the different examples that I gave you. If for whatever reason you are doing this on the phone or an iPad or whatever, you would need the keynote program to be able to really run this. So just in case, I've actually put the instructions also as a PDF so that you could download them. And the only flaw there is you won't be able to hear the examples. But for instance, as you go through the instructions, I'm going to play these sounds for you. And here, I'll just hit play. It's the easiest way of doing it. So this is, for instance, an original signal unaffected.
There's no place I'd rather be than in the midst of His majesty. Feel the power in my soul. This power worth much more than gold.
All right, so that was recorded in a studio. You could even hear a little bit of the bleed on the headphones, but more so just the vocal. You heard the quality of it. Didn't really sound like it was anywhere in like a big room or anything like that. So it would be very dry. Now, here's if I inserted a reverb on the channel strip. This would be the incorrect way of doing it. Listen to how the vocal sounds now.
There's no place I'd rather be than in the midst of His majesty. Feel the power in my soul. This power worth much more than gold.
All right, so what you just heard there, that would be just the reverb. We don't hear the original signal. So there's some stuff that's actually lost there. We've lost the original signal. The other thing that happens is because the original signal was perfectly on time with the music, the reverb's going to be slightly behind in time. So you might feel like, he's not singing on time. He's slightly lagging behind. Well, that's one problem that happens as well. Is also, you notice it's a little harder to understand him. But let's go ahead and hear it now done correctly, and I'm going to explain. This is using a reverb on an aux channel versus having it on the channel strip where the audio is physically. And I'm going to show you how to set that all up. We're going to have a send feeding a bus, which then is the input for that aux channel. But listen to the vocal and see how much difference there is now.
There's no place I'd rather be than in the midst of His majesty. Feel the power in my soul. This power worth much more than gold.
All right. So hopefully you guys got to hear that. Please tell me if you got to hear all those examples. I definitely would hate that no one heard it. But you get to see how it can really change a vocal. So imagine in a song, which one would sound the best? Imagine music behind it and everything. Of course, the one with the reverb, giving him, a lot more space and dimension. So it really adds to his vocal. Makes it, truly sound, wonderful to our ears. It sounds natural, it sounds correct. We can hear his vocal, we can still understand him, and yet he still sounds, like he's in a very, very big hall or something like that. Let's say Carnegie Hall or whatever. And that's what I'm going to show you guys tonight. The instructions, as you guys can see, it's going to walk you through the whole thing. How to set stuff up, and definitely go through these instructions step by step. Step by step, and you guys will be able to see everything I'm going to be showing you tonight and doing it yourself. So if you're hands-on type of person to learn, this is definitely the way to do it. Let's go ahead and just, I guess I can just hide this for now. All right. Now, And I'll open up two things. Logic Session. This is the one you're going to be downloading. All right. First, you'll see is a vocal track, and here's the mixer. If you need to open up, the mixer should be there, but if you ever wonder how to get there quickly to have it in the main window, it's this button right here. Or you can view, and right under view, you'll see you're able to show the different things that you want. I'm sorry, not view, window. I was just like, where'd it go? Open mixer. And it opens up in a separate window, just the mixer, which could be useful sometimes. Let's open up the other thing, which is, I'm going to show you guys the in the stuff that you guys get to download, besides the Logic Session and the instructions, I've given you this Flash file. This is something I created to help hopefully get you guys to understand signal flow. If you have the plugin already in your, as far as Flash, to play Flash files within your browser, it will open up in its own page. If not, you could download the file like I did, and it's an SWF file, which you guys do have the player if you downloaded it when I gave you guys, and you'll be able to actually do all this. So let's push it over here. All right. So first thing you'll notice is I don't have a reverb set up here. This is where that vocal track is. Let's solo that. I'm going to, for right now, I'm going to bypass everything I've set up. This is just going to be the vocal.
There's no place I'd rather be than in the midst of His Majesty. Feel the power.
That might sound familiar. It's the same vocal that I used for the example for you guys. So if I put a reverb on this channel strip, I mess it up and I get nothing but the reverb sound. So I want to add. So how do I do that? I can actually take some of the signal that's going in this channel path. I know this is digital, but they still use the analogy from the old analog days. This is a channel path, and I'm going to use a send, set up a send, and you could easily do that. I could just come over here. You can see I select which bus I want to use, and if you notice, there's over 256 buses. So Logic gives you a lot more routing capabilities than any analog desk you'll ever jump on. But this is the same with most DAWs. They're going to give you a lot of stuff. If you hover over what you've set up, you'll see it tells you, like for instance on this one, which I have turned off right now. Oh, that's how you turn it on and off if you wish. It's a little, you know, it looks like a power button. But I have send one, feeding, bus one, going to reverb. That's this one, the chroma reverb. Example aux. So this is one of the example auxes that I've kind of set up. You'll see it's named right here, reverb example aux, because you could name them. That way later if I want to add reverb to something else, I can actually stack them on top of each other. This gives you a whole new mixing console, you might say, through these sends. But you'll see it says bus 1. Notice on this aux, it says bus 1. So this is already routed for us. And as you guys will learn, Logic is smart enough to know that if you set up a new bus going somewhere, it will know that, hey, I need to set up an aux somewhere. So as soon as you turn on a new bus, select something that's empty, it will know, okay, I need to create an aux. And it will go ahead and do that. I'll go ahead and do that real quick. You'll see bus 3, and notice that aux 3 was immediately created. I'm going to undo that. Unfortunately, it doesn't get rid of the aux. So I'm going to get rid of it over here. No, I don't want to. Let's just delete it. That'll be the quickest. All right. So now I'm back to the same spot that I had before. Now, when you set something up, that doesn't send the signal directly over to here. I need to turn. In other words, you'll see there's a knob right here that you're sending signal. This is where this comes into handy. I'm going to show you guys right here this interactive guide that I created in Flash for you to be able to understand a little bit. And I'm using what they call water analogy. We're thinking of the signal as water, and our signal path is pipes. So I have right here a fader, or a valve for the audio. Audio 1's coming through here, so that's that channel strip. Here's the fader, that's equal to this fader. If I turn this up, then audio will go down, or water, go down the pipe and feed what we call the mix bus. So that main mixing pipe, you might say, and then the audio goes to your mix output. So let's try that. You guys hear right now just a drum loop happening. I'm going to go ahead and kill it for a second. But notice that, hey, just like water, it goes down the pipe and over to the next pipe. These valves are closed. They're set up. That's the bus 1, for instance, bus 2. And they send some of the signal, not all of it, some of it, because some of it goes down. You can think of this as or a copy of, goes this way, and you have a valve for that. Right, that's the same thing as this knob right here, turning it up. So if I turn it up, I guess I should stop for a second. If I turn it up, now I open up the valve, then some of the water will actually be able to go this way through this pipe down to this aux. So this is bus 1 feeding aux 1, and let's say it's going to a delay unit. So this is where I have my time base effect. It's going to be on the aux. So here we'll show you in the mixer. Audio is coming down. I have a send set up, send 1. That's feeding bus 1. I have it turned up a bit. So in other words, it's coming over to this aux, sending some of the signal through this channel strip. And guess what? This is where, in this case, I have reverb. You'll notice bus 2, I have a delay unit. So here's a send for the next track, the drum track. It's going to feed a delay unit. So let's try that out. Let me close this valve again. Reopen. Let's turn on the reverb one. You'll notice bus 2 right here feeds the reverb. So now you can see some of the audio is actually feeding that bus, going through the reverb unit, changing the audio. That's why I changed the color. So I washed it out, and it's now feeding the mix. And we're hearing the original signal, right? That's the drum loop, and the reverb of that drum loop. So the combination of both. This is how we set up time-based effects. If I turn it down, well, of course, we get nothing but the original signal. If I have this completely off and I turn this on, nothing happens, because these effects, these time-based effects, are set up what they call post or after that main fader. So something else that does is, think back at that drum machine loop that's playing. If I turn this completely down or completely up, I hear a lot of reverb because a lot of signals feeding that reverb. Then as I change this level, think of it here, turning this level, I change also how much is feeding the reverb unit. That works out perfect because as we automate or bring down this level in the mix anywhere in the song, then the amount of reverb doesn't stay fully on or loud. it actually changes with the amount of signal. So when we do a blend between this fader and this fader, one single fader will control and keep that blend the same. Hopefully that's making sense to you guys. So I can't do it here as far as changing, besides on off, it's just too much programming, but you guys can hear, there's my reverb level. There is something where I could change these sends to be pre, in other words, before this fader, pre-fader. But that's as you guys get more in depth into this. It's all in the send. You'll see here I have it post pan. That's normally we're going to have it, or post fader. You can have it pre-fader, but then you end up getting something completely different. There I could have just reverb playing and control the level of the original signal. Consoles or DAWs give you so many different routing capabilities, and it's a matter of time for you to just learn how to use these to your advantage. For now, just keep it post fader because that's the most common way you're going to see it, and you'll be able to set that up. So back to this water analogy. You've heard it with the reverb. Now think of it as also I can set up multiple buses. So here's bus 1, goes across to the delay unit. Let's bring in a delay. You guys can hear the delayed signal now as well. So you got to see how I could set up different sends, feeding bus lines, feeding different effects units. So with our vocal, let's come back over here. I'm going to bring this guy down. Hit play.
There's no place
I can now set up
and in the midst of His majesty, feel
the
the
feed.
power in my soul.
And you
This power
see-
worth much more than gold.
I'm
wondering
if that's a little loud. But I'm able to send some of the signal over to that chroma reverb, and you'll see it right here, the reverb.
Give thanks.
And then I have reverb on this fader and original signal on this fader. Logix is also smart enough to know that, hey, if I've got the original track of the vocal soloed, it's going to automatically set these guys up also to be soloed. Any of these sends that are being fed, I should say, from that track will also be audible for us, so that you could hear when you solo it, you hear both the original and the effect. If you needed to hear just the original, then you can also just mute that reverb track.
There's no place I'd rather be than in the midst of His majesty.
Now, having it this way also gives us a lot more control. If I were to have it just here, I would only be able to, control the level of both things with one fader. And I can't change my blend. Here, I could actually make it, well, I don't want as much reverb. See, now it's just a little bit farther in the back. Or I want more reverb.
This power worth much more than gold.
You can see how I could control that very easily now without changing the level of the original signal, which is working perfect, let's say, for the mix. I just bring up the reverb to make it fit better in the mix. And think about also what you're doing by adding reverb. I'm changing that position of the vocal. We're going to be talking about mix 1, and you're going to be in mix 1 be able to do time-based effects as well as everything else. But I'm able to add reverb in different amounts to position the person in different spots in the room. Let's think of real world. If a singer is right in front of you, you're going to hear his original sound coming out of his mouth, and that is the direct sound, a lot sooner and a lot louder than if he was 10 feet in front of you or 20 feet in front of you. If he's 20 feet in front of you, then you're going to hear some of the reflections and the original vocal almost at the same level. So you're going to hear more reflections level-wise than when the original signal is also 20 feet away, than if he was right in front of you, because he would be louder. So you could actually duplicate that right here. If we have him closer to us, well then we'd have him louder, and the reverb would be a little less. If he's farther away, then he'd be down and the reverb would be up a little bit. So you're positioning the person within your stereo field back and forth with that reverb. You can actually make it sound like he's, closer to you or farther to you. Think about some of your favorite songs. You may have had a spot in the song where it sounds like the person's singing right to you, right in your ears. And then other spots where the background singers, for instance, sound like, oh, they're farther back than the lead singer. This is how they do that. They do a blend between. And the only way they could do that is because they've set up stuff correctly. They've got the send feeding a bus, which then is on an aux channel. That aux channel has the effect on it. So that's the proper way of setting up time-based effects. The rest of the things is you get to play around with some of the actual effects themselves. Like for instance, let's go back to this reverb. I could sit here and change the decay. Let me bring it up a little bit since I've been messing with the levels. Original vocal. Let's say I want the room to be smaller, so my decay time would change. You guys could hear it sounds like he's in a smaller room. Now let's put him in a big garage or a big warehouse.
Yes, I do.
You changed the decay time. Now, that's just a quick way of showing you as far as reverbs. You're going to get more in depth into how to use these effects later in different classes. But for now, hey, you could turn on a reverb. You're able to change the decay, which is the main parameter in a reverb, and make it sound in a different position. The rest of it, like pre-delay, attack, you have size, density, you're thinking about how many reflections are within the room. This also has almost like a built-in EQ, so that way there's more reverb across the high-end frequencies than there is the low. So that would be more like a metallic room. A warehouse, for instance, has more high-end frequency reflections. You're able to control all of these things. I know we don't want you to really mess around with presets, especially for EQ, compression, gating, and all that, because it really doesn't work. With something like a reverb and a flange and those things, you could go ahead and play around with a little bit with the presets if you wish. Like for instance, if you want to hear different types of rooms, this is a chamber. I can actually come right over here and select. I want it to sound like a room. I want it to sound more like a theater, a vocal hall. You could change some of these characteristics of that reverb. With some reverb units, you're able to choose even different styles of reverb. You'll hear stuff like plate reverbs, spring reverbs. These are all different parameters and different reactions of how the reverb works. This is more depth. For now, you guys just, if you want to, play around with it a little bit, but understand the main thing right now is just we want to show you how to set these things up correctly. In other words, the routing. We are, in the assignments and even in the mix, we won't grade you on, what reverb you chose or anything like that. It's more so about, hey, did you route everything correctly so that the signal is done the correct way? You're able to control both the original and the affected signal in a way where in your mix you really have total control of positioning and everything else. The assignment, let me find the instructions. Also within the interactive thing, you can see how it would look like pre-fader. So here's those faders. Remember, I can now send signal pre. And this is just a picture to show you. I have also sat here and drew out to, again, show you the analogy of, okay, well, this fader would be equivalent to this audio fader. The signal goes through that channel strip as it goes through this channel strip. A bus, see bus 1 is feeding fed right here, and then you have the volume for that bus 1. Bus 2, right underneath it, volume for bus 2. This stuff feeds that aux 1. You'll notice here it says, this aux 1 is being fed by bus number 1. Aux 2 is being fed by bus number 2. So the interactive guide really helps you guys out, really understand, and going back to here, as you turn knobs and everything, I've actually written a whole explanation as to what's actually happening with the audio. So you can see every single time you have something engaged, it will tell you what's happening to the audio and hopefully truly help you understand, because the routing in any mix is really important. It gives you a lot of control. Close that now and back to the instructions. Where are my instructions? All right, they're hidden somewhere underneath here. Okay, I may have closed them. No problem. Let's come back over to the time base. Oh, that's right. It's done in a keynote. There we go. All right. So as you can see, the instructions will walk you through everything I've just explained. I have you actually messing around with the first few tracks. So I've already got it set up for you. Let you play around with stuff. See how I've routed it for vocals and the drum track. For the drum track, I've set it up for a delay unit. I've put the auxes right next to it so you could really see what's happening and everything. Once you get to this track, the bass track, there we're going to actually have you set one up yourself. You're going to start setting it up, and I walk you through it at the same time. So I show you how, in the instructions, how to set this up the way I just explained to physically be able to have it correct, set up correctly. Track 5, bass track, you'll see I tell you right here how to set stuff up. I show you we're going to set up a chorus. I even show you how to set up the effect. And even give you an example, again, kind of like the water analogy. Hey, signal's going down this way. That's the main signal. It's through that channel path. Think of it as hitting the stereo bus out. But then our send, when we turn it up, bus number 5 is going to feed this aux channel, aux 3, and we're going to add a chorus to it. So now the chorused audio goes down this channel path, and we have a volume for that one, and we can blend between these two to give you the bass sound that's chorused. And chorus on a bass is makes it thicker, makes it sound wider. You'll get to see how all this is done as you follow these instructions. They go pretty in depth. I try to explain quite a bit. I even tell you, hey, this is a good setting to set up for the chorus. With track number 6, we're going to now work on a vocal, a different vocal, than you did on the track number 1. And on this one, we'll be adding a time-based effect as well. And as well as also on track number 7. Now, track number 8, or I should say it should be 7 and 8. Come over here real quick. Or 6 and 7, I'm sorry. We're going to be bouncing down after you've set up everything for the vocal track with audible reverb. You're going to create a MP3 of that at 320 kilobytes per second. So high quality MP3 of track number 6. You're going to be turning that in. You're also going to have a screenshot showing, of course, your setup. It's going to be the mixer window. One single screenshot for both these is actually fine, because if you show me the mixer window, I'm going to be able to see everything. And then an MP3 of track number 7, the snare track with an audible delay. So when I hit play on those MP3s, on the one of the vocal, I want to hear some reverb on there, and the one with the snare drum, I want to hear some delay. You'll notice, come back over to the mixer window. All right, you'll notice that I've already got a gate happening on the snare, so that way we only get the snare. Main thing here to think of is, if I didn't have that gate there, remember you guys already got to play around with that snare track and you gated it earlier in the gating assignment. If you remember, we had bleed. If I put a delay onto that channel, or I should say through an aux, if we set up a delay, time-based effect on that actual snare, we would also have a delay of all the bleed, and it would make the snares sound horrible, because we're going to have all this bleed kind of bouncing around. So we want to gate that before we actually start feeding a delay unit through an aux. So I've already got it pre-gated for you. You don't have to mess around with that, but I like pointing it out to you guys so that you really can see a really good way of, or I should say a really good reason as to why we need a gate on, for instance, a snare track. If you wish, after you set it up, you could even take this off, turn it off, and hear the difference. But leave it on for when you're bouncing this down. All right. So when you bounce it down, you'll have, of course, the signal routed. In fact, why don't we go ahead and I'm going to do one of these. Let's see. The snare is with delay, so let's set that up. Come over here, just so I'll use the same as the, there we go. We're going to solo that track, right? It's already gated for us, and we just need to add a delay. All right, cool. Now, after you've done all these other tracks, you should be able to do this without any problem. I'm going to come over here to one of the sends on the snare track. I'll go ahead and solo that first of all. So one of the sends on the snare track. Come over here, choose a bus that is empty. And honestly, it doesn't matter which one as long as it's empty. And I'll go ahead and grab, let's say, number 10. You see, as soon as I did that, an extra aux was created, aux 3 in this case. So bus 10, you'll notice over here, bus 10 is the input. So this is routed correctly. If I hit play, we hear our snare. And, well, let's come over here on this aux channel. Let's add a delay. Under your audio effects is where you would actually do this. Here you can start selecting any kind of effect you want, but because we're set up through an aux, we're going to set it up a time-based effect. No reason for me to put some sort of dynamic effect there. It can be done, and that's if you want to, let's say, compress the delays or something. But for now, let's just make it a straight delay. I come over here, and I've got a few choices just from the Logic. I'm going to go ahead and grab a tape delay. I like that one. So here we go. Here's the tape delay. Hit play. Now, I don't hear a delay. Now, can someone point out to me, hopefully you guys have been listening, what do you think I need to do? Just to see if you guys were listening. Anyone? Alright, I'm not really seeing a response. Turn up the knob. Yep, that's it. Put it on the aux. Alright, well, the turn up the knob is basically the correct answer. Remember, yes, I've set up the feed. It's routed to the aux. I've put the effect on the aux, so this is all set up correctly, but hey, I need to turn up my signal. So I'm going to hit play again, and let's turn this up now. Now we're starting to hear a delay. Let's give it a little bit more signal. Now I'm hearing this tape delay, and it's I'm able to switch my delay times, shorten the delay times. One thing I'll point out is you have the capability of tempo syncing the delay unit. The delay, unfortunately, because these snares weren't recorded with a metronome, it's just some snares that we grabbed from one song. So this tempo sync really doesn't help me out too much. I'm going to go ahead and take that off, because otherwise it is synced. And if you guys who know music, you could actually tell it, hey, I want this to bounce every quarter note. And it sets up your correct delay time. You can see it right there. But being that this was never recorded to a metronome or never done with a sequencer, I'm going to take this off so that way I could really control how many milliseconds I have of delay time. See there, that sounds a little better than before for the quarter notes. I'm able to control the level of those delays here now. When I'm loud, notice my level isn't changing. That's because I have it, if you guys remember, I could change it to pre-fader metering or afterwards. Pre-fader metering is great for when you're using EQs, compressors, and everything to make sure you're not clipping the signal, but once you've finished, you could actually shut that off, and I could see more about my, let's say, delay. See, now you see the delays are much softer than the output of that snare track. Or they're just as loud. Something else that's pretty cool with the delay unit is you hear about one single bounce there. You want to control how many bounces are happening. Very simple. You just turn the feedback up. Let's hit play again. You'll see what I mean. 16%. You're only getting about one single bounce. Let's turn it up to 67. You'll notice there's a lot more bounces there, especially, let's bring this down. Control the feedback down. See, I could only really hear about one single bounce there. But if I bring it up, you know, I could even make it ridiculous. I'll go ahead and stop right there. Stop playing around. But you get to see the main, parameters on delays, of course, will be the delay time and the feedback. You do have other capabilities, and depending on which plugin you're using, it'll be, I guess I should turn that up 100%, but it'll be, those two will always be there. The rest is kind of like add-ons. Same thing like, if you remember, the compressors and some of the other things had extra knobs giving you more features, but standard delay, just delay time and feedback is all you really need. There, it's much louder. I didn't have the volume turned up all the way. You'll notice that, let's say a single snare passes through. I'm going to hit play and then stop real quick. You'll notice each delay gets brought down. So you get the original bounce, then all the sequential bounces happening at that many milliseconds. It's because some of the signal is fed back into the input again and back through, but each time it's brought down and level. So that's a quick synopsis of how a delay kind of works. But again, it's important to have this set up to where we have a send feeding a bus, and that's feeding an aux. That aux channel then has the actual time base effect sitting on it. So in this case, we have a delay, a tape delay in this case. But you're able to, again, control the original signal, control the delayed signal, and blend the two together in our, stereo mix. All right, I think I've kind of explained everything you guys need to know at the, if you remember at the bottom of the assignment page, as well as also in the instructions, I've also added it. You have the grading checklist. This lets you see everything that we are checking for when we grade this. We're going to look for a bounced track number 6. In other words, that's the, let me see, that would be not the snare, but the vocal, I think. Yeah, with reverb. We'll have to see that it's an MP3 at 320. We'll need a bounced of track number 7 with a delay. That's the snare one we just did. I'll need an audio file also at MP3 320 kilobytes per second. You'll notice up here I checked to see that you, from your Logic session, which is also on here, Logic session uploaded, I'm going to check to make sure that you have proper routing of your reverb effect on track number 6, and also proper routing of the delay effect on track number 7. So in other words, this delay is going to be on the aux, but it's going to be fed from track number 7. This reverb is going to be on the actual aux that's being fed from track number 6. And you do that via a send and a bus. The next thing you'll notice on here also is the submit screenshot of the mix window. So real quick, I could show you. Here's the mix window. We could have just a screenshot of this, and I could see exactly how you have everything routed. So a nice mix window screenshot is perfect. I can use it as a backup to see that you've got stuff routed correctly. Next thing you'll see track showing aux effects parameters done for assignment. In other words, I'm going to look and I'll be able to check out from the Logic file that you guys did all the work, on these 1, 2, 3, 4 tracks, or I'm sorry, 3 tracks before you actually have the 2 that you actually need to turn in, which is the vocal track and the snare track. You'll notice I actually have another track on here, this guitar track. The guitar track, track number 8, is for you to have a little bit of fun. Try adding delay and reverb to it. You can see I could actually stack how many sends I want off of a single channel. And you could get to the point where it gets kind of crazy. You could have 256 different buses being fed from that channel. So you'll never get that, nuts with effects, but it's nice to know that you have that capability within the DAWs. So set it up, blend between the reverb and that, delay unit, and have some fun with it. Track number 8, you don't have to turn in or anything. I will help you if you do it. I will look through here and make sure that you have everything set up correctly. The other thing I want to point out is that if, let's say, this delay, right here is a stereo delay that was set up from the drum track from, second track over here, and I want to use that same delay for this guitar track. I don't need to set up a new bus that's empty and set a whole thing up and then copy that delay over to that bus. I could actually come over here and say, well, bus number 2 is feeding that delay. So let me come right here to bus number 2, set up. So you notice bus number 2, both these channels will be feeding, as soon as we turn it up, both these channels will be feeding that delay unit. So this works great, for instance, for saving both processor power from your computer, as well as also giving you the exact same sound. Think of, let's say you have 5 singers that are on this track. If you put a separate different reverb on every single singer, then they're going to sound like they're in different places. Us as listeners would listen to this and go, that sounds weird. Why does one person sound like he's in a warehouse and the other one sounds like he's singing in a bathroom? You putting a single reverb unit and then having all the different singers feed that single reverb unit, in other words, through that same bus, you can now make it sound like they're all in the same room. And your send level right here gives you a way of blending how much each person is going to be coming out of that reverb unit. So again, it gives us a way of doing a separate mix, you might say, feeding a single reverb plugin. Well, that's how you could actually, set up multiple things. Let's say right here's a delay, right here's the reverb. I now have this first send feeding the delay unit, this second send feeding the reverb unit, and if I wanted to, I could add something else, something new. You can see I just created bus number 6. It created a new aux, and I can come over here and say, well, I also want a flanger. So now that guitar track can have delay, reverb, and flanger effects. And you blend them and mix them as you wish. A lot of control this way. This is why it's so important for you to truly understand how routing works within the console, or within the DAW, I should say. This same concept works also with any analog console. So if you guys are helping out, let's say you're mixing sound for a friend who's in a band, or you're at church, you're helping out by being the engineer at the church gig, you'll have that capability where you could start turning up buses or sends to feed an external, let's say, reverb unit. Same thing, same concept. All these DAWs are modeled after, true real-world analog desk. So you have that same structure, or you might say, the way the thing is built.